Okay, so let's get started. Thank you so much for typing in the chat, everyone. Welcome again to Protecting Your Mind, Mental Health Before, During, and After a Crisis. So, May, if you did not know, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I actually had this webinar last year with Ana Ayobiojo, who is a mental health coach and consultant. And I found it very important given all the things that we're going through really over the course of the last 15 months. I mean, it has just been a very difficult 15 months for many of us with a worldwide pandemic, social unrest, and yesterday was the 1 year since the murder of George Floyd. So that is still looming in the hearts of minds of many. And with really the unveiling of where we are as a country with systemic racism, with politics, with increasing polarization, with job loss, all these things are weighing on us. And so, as we're continuing to navigate these challenges together, some people are working from home, some people have lost their jobs. All of that is weighing in as we're now trying to navigate back to an on-site work environment. And it frankly doesn't help now that the CDC has lifted some of the restrictions. States have adopted that, and employers are now scrambling to figure out what they're going to do. So there's increased anxiety. In fact, when I posted about this session, I got a number of text messages, emails, people direct messaged me and say, I'm anxious about returning to work. This is such a timely topic. There's so much going on, and this is much needed. And so that's why I invited my friend and colleague, Ana Ayobiojo, to have this conversation with me about what is mental health. Now, I will introduce Ana, who you guys will see on camera, but Ana is a clinical coach, self-care consultant, therapist. She is a published author, so please support her. Go out and get her book. But she is experienced in mental health and has a decade of experience working with children and families in Boston and the Brockton area. Her experience ranges from case management to homeless families and working with the children with severe emotional disturbances as in-home therapy clinician. She has experienced her own personal battle with PTSD and depression, and she speaks about it very courageously in her book, From Survival Mode to Greatness. She received her BA in psychology with a minor in Latino studies from Northeastern University in 2010. She then earned her master's in counseling with a concentration in Latino mental health from William James College in 2015. She shares her life with her husband, Annie, who they've been with, who she's been married to for 10 years. And she has two boys, Grant Grayson, and her baby girl, Gianna, who is absolutely adorable. And so she is going to be our expert for this conversation. And many of you know me because I've been doing the Leadership at Work series, and maybe we've worked together, or you know me through social media. But my name is Jessie St. Cyr, and I'm the principal owner of St. Cyr Consulting and also the creator of the Leadership at Work series. I am an attorney by trade, and I launched my business, St. Cyr Consulting, about 3 years ago, and we focus on leadership development, HR solutions, and diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies. And we have a small team of very experienced professionals who can support you and your organization with your leadership development, HR, and D&I needs. And so for today, what we'll cover is what is mental health? As we're all going through these challenges, it is important that we understand what mental health is and what it is not. We're going to talk about the effects. If you could go back, Kirsten, for some reason. But we're going to talk about the effects of these crises on mental health. We're going to talk about the importance of protecting your mind. And then we're going to share some tips for the journey ahead. And so, without further ado, I'd love for Anna, if you could just share some thoughts on mental health and what we're all experiencing now because of all of the challenges that I mentioned before.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jesse. I first want to thank you for putting this together once again. It is super important, especially mental health in general. But as you mentioned, during these times, to have the resources and the information is so important. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So mental health is the cognitive, behavioral, and emotional well-being of an individual. It's basically how we think, act, and behave, and it impacts our daily decisions. It impacts how we relate to one another. And I like to include the aspect of thinking of mental health on a continuum, because many people think it's sort of mental illness, or they'll use mental illness and mental health interchangeably, and it's not the same thing. Mental health, everyone has mental health the same as they have physical health. And I want you to think about it on a continuum. If you have sort of picture a timeline kind of thing, a mental health is in the middle, mental illness is on one end, and mental wellness is on the other. And people can move through this continuum depending on life circumstances. And so, like I mentioned, mental health is something that we all have, but not everyone has a mental illness. It's the same way that a person can have a physical disability or a physical illness, whereas somebody else may just have poor physical health and they're just, let's say, out of shape, or may have, sometimes get sick and that kind of thing. It's the same thing with mental health. It could be that someone can have poor mental health, but not necessarily a mental illness. And so I like to include that because they're not the same thing. And in terms of everything that we've been dealing with for the past year, a lot of what I have seen is all summed up into uncertainty, right? Because uncertainty and fear. People don't know what is happening, and they only know what's being fed to them through media, right? Which is a lot of fear. And that uncertainty has produced a lot of anxiety, as well as the isolation and the lack of choice, right? Not being able to go out as you please, or do whatever you want, and being told what to do. That lack of choice really leaves people in a place of feeling vulnerable, and you're at the expense of other people. And so anxiety and depression has been at an all-time high. But with that, it's also things that probably were there before and were dormant. And now a lot of things are coming to the surface. And so for some people that may have been dealing with issues in their job, or uncertainty with job, a lot of people have lost their jobs. And so dealing with financial issues are now causing more stress. Or individuals who were having issues in their marriage, now it becomes more highlighted, and the stressors of life have now added pressure to what they were already experiencing. For a lot of people, the social injustice, things that were already there, now become even more highlighted. So now people are living in fear at an all-time high. It has, of course, caused people to take more action in different ways, but it has caused people sort of that fear of one another, I have found as well, right? So even with like COVID, I don't know if you have COVID, don't come near me. And so people have sort of become distrustful of one another. I don't know what your political views are, and so you become distrustful of one another, as well as in our children. I definitely want to highlight youth. Sort of that virtual life is it's okay for them if they're playing video games, but now having to learn via this method and not being able to be social with their friends, and being in the home a lot, I have found that unfortunately depression and anxiety has risen, as well as suicidal rates and ideation in children. which therefore has added pressure to families, and families working from home with children. There has been just so much different layers that have caused people to just be stressed at an all-time high. And then therefore they feel like there's also no resources. There haven't been as many resources when it comes to mental health, or access to mental health resources. So those are some of the things that we've seen in the past year.
So, and that's important. And someone did just ask if you could describe again, what is the continuum that you mentioned about mental health? You said early on that everyone has mental health, and there's essentially a spectrum or a continuum that the person, this is the word the person used when it comes to mental health. Can you repeat that again?
Yeah, absolutely. So we think about it sort of, I just like to picture, I'm very visual as well. So that's why I say sort of a timeline. If you picture a timeline and mental health is in the middle, and then you put mental illness on one end, and then put mental wellness on the other end, it's sort of this aspect of everybody having mental health. And depending on life circumstances or trauma, you move on this continuum. So right now we all have mental health, right? And so this pandemic, how it's impacted us, could possibly be pushing us towards a little bit of illness or poor mental health, right? So for some people that may have underlying trauma issues, they could have gone on the end of having an anxiety diagnosis or depression diagnosis, or possibly not knowing that they were already experiencing these things and they were undiagnosed, right? So for a lot of people, these things were dormant, and they're like, I had poor mental health before, but this just increased my likelihood of now having an illness where I didn't know I had these issues. Now I've discovered I have ADHD or something like that. But for some, it may just be that they had, you know, decent mental health and they moved a little bit on the poor side, which means something, for example, of not being able to control the negative thoughts, having negative thinking patterns. Whereas someone who has a little bit better mental health, you have these thoughts, you have these negative thoughts, but you have the tools and you can navigate these thoughts, you acknowledge them, and you can move past them. But when you have poor mental health or you experience that disruption, now those things become a little bit more prevalent throughout the day, where you're thinking about these things throughout the day more and more often, and then they impact your behavior. Where now, and your feelings as well, now you're moody, now you're sort of snapping at people, or you're canceling a date, you're like, I don't even want to go on Zoom, so those are some things to look out for. And then wellness on the other end is where you're experiencing mental health and you're like, not that life is great, things still happen, you're not happy all the time, but you're able to deal with life stressors, you're able to deal with certain crises in a better way because you have the tools that you need. I hope that was helpful. Please let me know if I need to explain it in a different way. I do not mind at all.
And I will reiterate that if you do have a question throughout this conversation, please type in the chat if you're comfortable doing so. If you want to share a question, but you want to share it anonymously, you can send it directly to Kirsten Arnold, who is going to be monitoring the chat. If you would like to get on camera, just raise your virtual hand and let us know, and we'll make sure to have you speak. Just make sure to unmute yourself. But one of the things that we shared in our session last year, and I thought was very helpful for us to share again, is this graphic. So, and you mentioned that mental health is really three components. It's your thought life, it's your emotions, and it's your behaviors. And we all have mental health, right? So someone posted yesterday in sharing this session, she said, we all do an annual checkup around our physical health. We should do an annual checkup around our mental health. And her name is Joy Braxton. And I thought that was a really, really good thought. But can you just explain how our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors contribute to mental health?
Absolutely. So it's sort of that aspect that I was talking about earlier. It's when you have certain thoughts that then impact your mood and then impact the way you behave. And so I think we had talked last year about a cat. It was a black cat. If you see a black cat in an alley, and this is more like a vivid example, but if you see a black cat in an alley, your first thought is, oh my God, that's a burglar. All of a sudden, the emotions of fear come up and anxiety. And possibly, if you don't like black cats, you might run off. And so that impacts your behavior. Whereas if you're looking at the black cat, you stop, you pause, and you're like, oh, I recognize that this is a black cat. It clicks. Your thinking is, okay, it's just a black cat, and then your emotions are possibly relief, you're calm, and then your behavior is to go about, walking in the alley as so. And so that's an example of how your thinking and emotion impacts your behavior. And another example would be like the negative thinking patterns. If something happens, if you, let's say, text a friend and they don't text you back, all of a sudden your thought process is, maybe they don't want to be my friend anymore. Maybe I did something to them. All of a sudden you have these different thinking patterns that just take its own course, and you possibly then may feel sad, insecure. And then let's say your next behavior is to text them and say, hey, did I do something? And so that's an example of that. Whereas it's your thinking pattern is, okay, maybe this person is busy, or maybe they'll text me back later. Then your emotions are calm, you continue about your day, and then allow for the person to respond when they're able to.
So, as everyone has mental health, essentially, before crisis, we are able just to navigate everyday life with our emotions, our thoughts, our behaviors, and responding in a healthy, constructive way. But during a pandemic, worldwide pandemic, seeing really the life snuffed out of a human being on a sidewalk, and there's been, because now we've experienced being locked down, being quarantined. We're bombarded with all this news, negative news, a lot of fear-based news, and that impacts us. And as you kind of mentioned earlier, some of us, we've had other challenges that we're dealing with, health challenges, financial challenges. If you've lost your job, there have been a lot of stats, a lot of studies around what people are experiencing during a crisis. The CDC says in a study that over 40% of the survey respondents experienced some level of trauma or symptoms of trauma and stress related disorders. And then those who have experienced economic loss have experienced those types of symptoms much higher than those who are not experiencing some level of financial loss. And then Towers Watson did a great survey, and 92% of employees felt some level of anxiety. That's almost everybody. I know I did, and I'm not an employee. I'm the owner of a business, but of course I felt some level of anxiety. And I would love to just do an informal poll, just by a show of hands, or if you can type in the chat, have you felt some level of anxiety or frustration during the course of this pandemic and social unrest and increasing polarization? If you could, I mean, if you're comfortable, you could just type yes. You don't have to, or thumbs up or anything. That would be great. Yeah, everyone is feeling it. I mean, when people are text messaging me or DMing me or direct messaging me and saying, I'm not comfortable going back to work, so employers have to think about this. Leaders and organizations have to think about this. Businesses have to think about this. In fact, someone asked a question earlier about how this impacts businesses and what they should be doing to address. So I'm going to actually just use their question. Can you talk about mental health in relation to operating a business or being an entrepreneur inside the pandemic? I mean, employers are dealing with this, business owners are dealing with this. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, that's such a good question, especially because there's also a lot of emerging entrepreneurs in the midst of all of this. They had no choice. I think it's super important, and I mean for everyone, but especially for business owners and entrepreneurs because that is their livelihood. If you take a day off, let's say as an employee, you can use some of the time that you have and still get paid. Sometimes when you are the sole person, that's a lot of added pressure. If you don't show up and do the things that you have to do, you basically will not get paid, which is an added stressor, right? You need to pay bills. But I used this example last time, and it just helps me. But taking care of yourself and sort of starting with your mindset of how important self-care is, it is not a luxury. It is essential. It is a necessity. And when you think about self-care and serving from the overflow, because we all serve in some capacity, whether it be our employees or our consumers, we are serving. And so what you're serving other people comes from you. And when you fill your cup up first, you have an overflow to give everyone else. You have enough for yourself, to sustain your life. And then what you give them is the overflow. It's good stuff. I think about an empty cup that has coffee. You know that bitterness at the bottom?
Yeah.
Think about that. Serving your consumers, your people, basically the bitterness of the coffee. Because I think sometimes we think I cannot afford to engage in self-care. It's a luxury. But when you think about it like that, it's actually a part of your business. As an entrepreneur, you want to give the best of the best. As a business owner, you want to give the best of the best. And so I think it starts with the mindset that you are worthy of it alone. You are worthy of engaging in self-care, and then you want to be able to give the best of the best. But I think that every entrepreneur should definitely have a coach and a therapist, hands down, and business owners as well, because you want to continue to grow. And so you have a coach that helps you with your immediate, and we're so willing to invest in that. But I think a therapist just helps you manage those stressors, those things that other people don't understand. When you're thinking about, especially solopreneurs, when you have to do administration and you have to do billing and you have to do all these different things and wear these different hats. And some things are not even within your capacity. I will admit I am not good at administration, right? So that pulls on a different part of me that adds stress to me. And so being able to filter that and being able to go to a therapist and talk about these different things. And sometimes you may realize there's some underlying things there. So I think it's important definitely to have a therapist, have a person, as well as a tribe. You need a support group that is not only your friends but people in your industry, right, that will be able to help you sometimes navigate. Sometimes we have so many things that we're thinking about that we're not able to think about clearly, and something that you're stressed about you can bring to your tribe, and you're able to talk these things out, especially let's say as leaders of corporations and things like that. You're constantly stressed, you're constantly thinking, wheels turning. Some people are consuming tons of caffeine in order to go because you have many decisions to make, and which can lead to burnout, which is a different conversation within itself. But you want to be able to have a solid support group that can help you filter these things so that all the pressure isn't on you. And then, we get into having decision fatigue because you're making so many decisions. Eventually, you experience decision fatigue and you don't even know what you want to eat for lunch. And so it gets to that point, and then you borderline into burnout, which then impacts your business negatively because you may have to shut down for several weeks at a time. So having systems in place, not only for your business, because when you have a good business, you have systems in place to pick up certain things, the billing system and all these different things. And if you think about yourself as an organization, you need systems in place. You need to have a list of the things that you enjoy doing. Being okay with playing. As adults, it's so hard for us to play and to find joy, especially in the midst of all of this. Some of us may even feel guilty because we're not, maybe we didn't get COVID or we didn't experience that grief, or we didn't get sick or anything like that. And so we feel guilty because we didn't experience those things. And so it's hard for us to find joy. But I think finding joy and finding peace and sort of protecting that is so important. And so that, I apologize. I'm going to try to speak louder than my heater. If you can't.
We can. That's okay. That's okay. It's not an issue.
Okay.
I can hear you. Everyone else, I think you can hear her, but just type in the chat if it's an issue. Okay.
Let me know. I'm sorry about that. This is real life, right? Also in like this Zoom world, it's navigating these different environments, because now you start thinking, okay, can people hear that? Can people? I like putting it out there because it's there, and we're very informal. So please let me know. But like I was saying, it's important to protect your peace and protect your mind. And so a lot of that comes with consuming. I think a lot of people have been consuming a lot of social media, and we think that it's a break, or consuming the media altogether. It's a break, or I don't have to think. But you're taking that in. Even when you're watching a show, a lot of the shows now, they're trying their best, but they're incorporating masks and incorporating the social issues and the social injustice within the shows. And so we're reliving that. So you think you're watching a show, right, in order to relax, and that's not the case. So being very mindful and just protecting, what you're watching, what you're consuming, even what you're eating. So, I think for entrepreneurs, I can keep going and going, but entrepreneurs and business owners, really creating systems in place when it comes to nutrition, what you're consuming, not only media, but also, food, things like that, exercising your body, experiencing play, joy, protecting your peace, and having a tribe, and including a therapist and a coach within your tribe.
So, and those are excellent points. And that's why I love having this conversation with you, is you give so practical advice and tips that we can readily apply in our lives. And before I pivot to employers and organizational leaders, and you kind of touched on that, I love the idea of filling up your cup before you help somebody else. And I love I love using the example of when you're on a plane, the instructions are always to put on your oxygen mask first before you help someone else. And it's so important that if you're not, think about it, if you're not breathing, if you don't have energy, you don't have the ability to make healthy decisions, you're not able to engage, and you're really working or living or acting or behaving or thinking on fumes, and you're not effective. And I can say this because I've had some very high profile positions as a state official in Massachusetts, and one of my former colleagues is on here, Jim McDonald, who's the first deputy treasurer for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I love him, excellent leader, great person, great mentor, great friend. But in one situation, I was just so stressed, and this was not during a pandemic, but this was during what we called Snowmageddon, when Massachusetts was just inundated with snow, and the snow didn't melt until like July. And transportation collapsed, and I was recruited to address ineffective workplace practices, and was very successful doing it, but it took a toll on me physically. And so in one meeting, and I shared this before, but I was temporarily blind in one eye, on the left eye, because of stress. And instead of going to the emergency room, immediately to the emergency room, I said, there's this meeting, the governor's chief of staff, the secretary, everybody's going to be there. This is a meeting that I regularly attend. And I had to report out on some things. I'm like, well, let's get to the meeting and I'll go to the emergency room. And I think as leaders, we do that. We try to put out the fires, we try to solve problems, and we're saving or helping everybody else, and we're not taking care of us. And if you get nothing else out of this conversation, self-care, I think, is the number one thing we have to prioritize, because guess what? If you fall apart, if you die, if something happens to you, your organization is going to move on. Your business, if you have a team of people, they'll move on. Things will move on without you. And so, for us to be able to enjoy life and be able to contribute at our best, I can't underscore that enough. taking care of yourself is a very important. And the stressors of the pandemic, social unrest, or bombarded with all this stuff online and on TV, is just, it's exhausting. And sometimes I just felt like, I was exhausted for no reason, sleeping but not feeling rested. How many of you, this resonates with you? If you could just type in the chat yes, or you could share your experience. Just you're sleeping, but your mind is running all of the time. And you think, and for me, my faith is critical. That is my number one anchor as a believer. I'm a Christian. And so that's my number one anchor. My family is a huge outlet, but having that friend, or just a group of people, my community that I can rely on, have conversations with. Anna, you're one of them. That helps. That helps just to release some of that stress, and not internalize it, which then is toxic for us, right? For everything that we do. And of course, Haagen-Dazs was my friend uh, during the pandemic, but I'm trying to get better. And then I had family members in my immediate family. 11 members of my family had COVID. 11. Okay. And that's not to include the extended family. So thankfully, thank God, nobody passed away. But these things are exhausting to think about. But let's shift a little bit to employers. I see a lot of questions here, and I'm going to get to them in a minute. But employers now, again, 92%, according to Towers Watson, 92% of employers, or employees, indicated that they have some anxiety related to what's going on. Could you imagine the people who are at home, who have to work from home, or have lost their jobs, and all the other stuff that they're absorbing, and trying to navigate through all those challenges? So let's talk about what employers can do, especially as we're now trying to get back to a new normal, or back to an on-site work model. What can employers do to support their employees?
Absolutely. I think that with all organizations, all school systems, I think the approach is definitely that trauma informed approach. I think from this point forward, trauma informed basically is sort of looking at the lens like every individual you meet has experienced trauma at some level. And at this point, we know for sure, because this has been a trauma for every single person. So now when you operate in that aspect of trauma informed, you sort of kind of think or give them, that grace. But we know now that everyone has experienced trauma. It just may look differently for every single person, and not assuming that. I think sometimes we think trauma is something major or something big, that someone may have experienced, even a car accident or whatever. For some people, losing their job, that's traumatic, right? So on top of the pandemic and everything like that, people have experienced other traumas, underlying traumas. And so we need to be looking at everybody from that lens, that you have experienced some trauma. And so we'll come from that place of empathy and compassion.
Yeah.
I think that is the way we need to lead in every single aspect, and not just assuming, because when we assume, we operate differently. There is no empathy and there is no compassion. But leading through trauma informed and leading with empathy and compassion allows us to sort of maneuver differently. And so the main things with trauma informed is safety, choice, collaboration, trustworthiness, and empowerment. I want to make sure I read it so that I can remember, because I always think about the trust, transparency, and collaboration, but I wanted to make sure we all had it. Safety, choice, collaboration, trustworthiness, and empowerment. And so the biggest thing is going to be making sure that people feel safe when they go back, because there was so much uncertainty and things like that. A lot of people will wonder about their jobs always, and they need to feel safe in knowing that the environment that they're in is, even when it comes to COVID, are they sanitizing and cleaning and things like that? that they have choice, that they have options, even if they're able to, work remotely twice a week or things like that. Just people have, they feel powerful. When you have a choice, you
Yeah.
feel empowered. You know what I mean? And that's one of the things I talked about earlier is a lot of people, we lost our choice. And so we want the option. It's like when your friend invites you out, you invited me. No, I don't want to go, but you gave me the option. It's something else when it's robbed from you. It's like, wait, I didn't want to go, but I wanted to be invited. So
Mm.
it's the same thing. It's just ensuring that people, their voices are heard, and that they are able to collaborate with some of the decisions. Of course, there are the things that only leaders can do, but that collaborating aspect is something that we should be exemplifying anyways. It's including the people that are doing the work, that are the heart of the work, that they're in it, in the decisions, because they're the ones that are experiencing a lot of what's going on in the organization. I think regular check-ins,
Yeah.
this will be time consuming, but it will be worthy. It will be worth it. Treat each individual with that privacy too, to have that one-on-one so that you know where their mind is at. So you're not making assumptions of what they experience, if they feel comfortable sharing what they experience, how things are going, what you can do to help them. Because a lot of people, it'll be a lot of different resources that they need, but for some people, they may have lost their homes. And sometimes people sort of hide these different living situations, and they'll live in their car or things like that, financial difficulties that impacts food security. So we have to take it back to the basics. Is this human being, do they have housing? Do they have food? Because sometimes we think because our basic needs are met, we just assume everybody else has the same situation, but we don't know everyone's situation. And so having those individual meetings to ensure that your employees have their basic needs met, and then ensuring that they feel safe, ensuring that their voices are heard. And then for employees, really advocating for yourself and what your needs are. I think people are afraid to speak up because they don't want to lose their job. But I think it's going to be more important than ever to speak up and advocate so that you can be a part of the collaboration and the solution.
So those are all excellent points. In fact, in the Leadership at Work series, we did a managing remotely session. I've also done some trainings for other organizations on leading with empathy. You can't give what you don't have. So if you're not showing empathy and grace to yourself first and foremost, what are you going to give to everyone else? You're going to be like, well, if I'm roughing through it, why can't you? Well, no, take a step back. We're not robots.
Yeah.
There's nothing normal about the last 15 months. And I saw Deidre's question there, and I'm going to ask that next. But this jump, this push to just get right to it, and just almost act like nothing has happened. It's not healthy at all. And I'm concerned about organizations that are just trying to jump over the last 15 years and say, okay, now let's get back to normal. There is no normal. It's let's just try to get back to a place where we have regular schedules and routines that are healthy and constructive, but normal is going to look different. We have to kind of redefine that, maybe replace that word with something else. But some of the things we talked about, you've mentioned, is checking in, scheduling that weekly check-in or that bi-weekly check-in, and making options available. Some people are okay to talk about their things in a group setting. Others are not comfortable with that. They need the private one-on-one conversation. And so it's important to make those options available, and to realize we're all adults. Employees are adults, your coworkers are adults, colleagues are adults, and to give them the space to make decisions and to have options available, as you mentioned, gives them that control that they need, to feel like the the world is not falling apart for them. and that they're part of the solution, they're part of the future. I think that's really, really important. And so Deidre's question is, she says that my organization is discussing return to an on-site work environment and a return to normal. I and others are challenged by the use of the word normal. No thanks. It makes my stomach ill. What are some tips to influence the mindset of leadership to think less operationally and more humanely? Mental health and social concerns are real and front and center. And I think we've kind of touched on some of those already. But employers, I think you have employee assistance programs if you're large enough and have the budget to support that, making those things available, having those check-ins, having experts, mental health awareness and mental health experts come in and have wellness conversations and providing resources and practical things that people can do are some of those tips or best practices that I would recommend. And there are many others, but I think even in managing performance, giving constructive feedback with some level of sympathy and empathy, I think is important. People are paid to do work, but with all the challenges that we're all dealing with, I think there should be some level of grace. Yes, people are getting paid to do a job, but do they need more time? Do they need more resources? Do they need more coaching? Should the project be maybe delayed? You know, one of the other sessions I talked about focusing with the end in mind, because now as everybody's coming back to an on-site work environment, what kind of workforce are you inheriting now from this pandemic? And recognizing those challenges, making resources and options available, but also if you took care of your employees throughout the pandemic, there's not going to be a huge turnover or resentment. People are going to feel like they were part of a family, of an organization that cared for them. But what are your thoughts on the word normal, and how can we help leaders think more humanely around work?
Absolutely. So I actually just wanted to add really quick, Jesse, too. I think was it Deidre, to as an employee, I was just going to say, although it is your leader's responsibility and to ensure that the resources are in place, but you can bring in contact, Jesse's organization or a mental health consultant to, you can offer the information to your leader and say, hey, this is an awesome resource that may help us in transitioning, and just plant the seed of, improving the conditions of the organization, so that you can operate better, and so that, they don't lose a beat. And so in helping them find this resource, really, you're putting it on the experts really to come in and help them see the difference. Because sometimes it depends on the leader. I think we want to assume that all leaders are good leaders, but unfortunately not all leaders are great. I know Jesse had an amazing training talking about the different types of leadership. But there unfortunately are leaders that aren't the best leaders, and they may need a little bit more help in having an open mind about the changes that need to happen, because they may be very, of the mindset of, we're going back to normal, and that's that. What we were doing before works, and that's that, which in all actuality, for a lot of us, we noticed that what we were doing before was not working at all. And so they may need a little help and assistance. So you can plant the seed of having them bring in a consultant, so that they can change the mindset of, the things that they have to do in the organization. Because it'll be very difficult, as well as bringing up the fact that the turnover will be higher. You will lose people. Whereas if you bring the resources for us, you will have the same people that you had. You'll have a happier crew working for you, right? And developing that whole family mindset that Jesse mentioned, that is golden for leaders. If you can create a culture of family, not forced, but providing an environment where it'll organically happen, it's golden, because people want to feel a belonging, a part of something, especially after this, because we've been isolated. And a lot of people, I won't go into that, but a lot of people have experienced relational issues with their own families, and a lot of falling apart with friends that were longtime friends, and all these different things. So they feel even more lonely and isolated. And creating that culture in your organization will be key, will be golden. But your question, Jesse, in terms of, it is a bit of a trigger for me because I think that going back to normal mentality really can hurt it can hurt us too, right? When you have unexpected, that unfulfilled expectations, like, here comes my heater again. When you have those expectations and they're unfulfilled, you will be unhappy, right? And if you have that expectation of returning back to normal and it's not fulfilled and you're constantly going against the current, you are going to get tired. And if you're thinking about an actual current, you will eventually drown. And so that will mean burnout, or that will mean, getting extremely sick. But when you're swimming with the current, just go with it. It's not going to go back to normal or what we know, and embracing that. Once you have that and embracing the mindset of, let's create a new normal, or let's embrace whatever it is, because we don't even know what's to come. And the reestablishing of certain systems and certain things and jobs and organizations, it's going to take some time. It is not going to be 3 months or 4 months. It took us a long time. For some people, they're still in denial of the fact that this whole pandemic even happened. But for some people, it took them a really long time to even embrace the fact that, this thing is real and we're in this right now. And so, let alone, what's going to happen after all of this, it's going to take a few years for people to operate in a different way, because there's a lot of mindset that has to change around, even going to the grocery store in a mask. Now it's normal, right? It's been a whole year and change, and now going into different establishments with a mask feels normal. But it took us some time, or even wearing gloves and things like that. That feels normal now, and now we're going to have to change our minds around. Now I don't have to wear a mask, so now there's anxiety around that. So allowing people the grace to get used to these different things, and allowing people the time that they need. Some of your people, let's say, may still want to wear a mask in
Mm.
different, walking down the hallway and things like that, and others may not. And so I think that changing our mindset, and embracing the fact that, there will not be a back to normal, and that will just cause more anxiety for yourself and others, but really embracing, what's to come, whatever that is.
Yeah, whatever that is. And I think that the period of adjustment is important. I was having this conversation for one of the sessions, Upgrading HR. We're talking about, and this was with Julie Quinn, who is former HR executive and now business owner, and 20 years of executive leadership experience. And we were talking about, she really talked about the adjustment period, the adjustment before, the adjustment during, and the adjustment afterwards. And I think one of the things that employers, leaders need to do is think about communication. Don't think that, well, we're returning back to on-site work environment this day and that's enough. No, there should be a good communication plan to recognize and appreciate what people have gone through, what you're doing to keep people safe, how they can come back to work safely, what you're doing to keep them safe, what options they have. And then also in your communications, providing resources that may assist them. And I think conducting surveys, having conversations with the workforce, with your teams, with your staff, to understand what the needs are so that they feel like they're part of the process. And that's part of being an inclusive leader, and ensuring that people have a sense of belonging in their workplace, that they're valued not just for the way that they perform, but they're valued as human beings in the workplace. And I think that is going to be the difference for employers who take this seriously, who invest in these tips and practices that we're just talking about. There was another question on adults and playing, and here it is. Do you have suggestions for environments that can help facilitate play as adults? And I'm reading the question, but I'm not entirely sure if I understand it correctly. But I think what you're saying there is, what can organizations do to help adults kind of maybe relax, and she uses the word play, but I'm not sure exactly what she meant by that. But if you can clarify, this was an anonymous question, but if
Yeah.
you could clarify that to Kirsten, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah. Um, so while they clarify, I can talk. Actually, I can mention something while they clarify, but I think I have an idea what she means by play. I wanted to touch on what you were talking about. You talked about sort of the diversity and inclusion and belonging for organizations. And the baseball story came up, my son in baseball. But I think it's important to have a team of members as an organization that you would go to ensure, this is my plan. Diverse people in all aspects. This is my plan for bringing back our employees. What do you think? So that you can have different opinions, because sometimes, we don't know everything. We know only from our experience, our personal experience, and our perception. And I was thinking about the baseball story because my son started playing baseball. And so we were at this big meeting in the parking lot, and they're talking about the different things that they do, and they're speaking in English. And I have a different personal experience as someone who is of Dominican descent, of someone who is Afro Dominicana. I speak Spanish. I know, that most baseball players and their families were thinking Puerto Rican and Dominican, but you're speaking only in English. And I'm looking around because I can see, I recognize my people, and I recognize Latinos, right? I have a different experience than he does. A different lens. And so I'm looking around this environment, and I'm like, a lot of these people are Latinos, and not only Puerto Ricans and Dominicans, there were a lot of Mexicans there. And so my first thought was, do these people even understand what you're saying? And then what happens is that there's a disconnect. There's no feeling of belonging. As a parent, if you don't understand what's going on, you are less likely to participate because you don't feel a part of it. Now there's a shame that comes with that because I don't speak the language, right? So for him to have, he had a few team members, but they didn't pick up on that. So ensuring that you have a diverse team that will pick up on something like that to ensure that needs are being met across the board, because you have people that can see things from a different lens. And so I just wanted to throw that in terms of inclusion and diversity, is having a team that is diverse in that aspect. And when it comes to the play, I think they mentioned it because I talked about play and finding joy earlier. And I think that, I don't know if there are any resources that focus specifically on play, but I think for organizations to have, even mental health consultants that can come in and sort of connect you with different resources like mindfulness coaches that will help you, relax and things like that. But in terms of play, this is where the individual work with the therapist comes in, because for a lot of different people, there's different reasons why you don't experience joy and why you don't play. For some people, a lot of that is developed, obviously, we know, in childhood, and everybody's childhood is different. And so sometimes exploring what your childhood was like for, some people that are, let's say, an older sibling, they acquired responsibility at an early age. So they became an adult at an early age. Maybe they had to work at an early age or had a lot of responsibility and felt the need to just focus on academics, whatever the case may be, but sort of that individual work. Okay, why do I have a hard time experiencing play? And so that is helpful when it comes to doing work with a therapist. And sometimes it may just be that you just need to integrate it. And with that, it's about trying different things. Did you ever learn how to rollerblade? Did you ever learn how to use a skateboard? Things like that you would have done as a child. When you do different things and different activities that sort of take you out of your comfort zone, something is like broken. Can you imagine like on a skateboard or something like that and you fall? First you get embarrassed, but then eventually you're like, oh, you can laugh about it. And if you don't laugh about it, then there's some work to be done there, right? But obviously we want to play and not do too much work, but finding those things that bring you joy. And it could be something as simple as being in nature. So it's really exploring as an individual, what are the things that bring you joy? One of the things I like to do is go on TikTok. I do not really consume too much of it because we have to set boundaries because it's too much sometimes. But there are some funny videos, right? And so just that aspect of laughing, it really boosts your immune system. It helps you relax. Like we don't think about it like that, but things that make you laugh really does something for your body. And so I think it's just really a personal work on trying different things that will bring you joy and help you play. If you have children, it's a little bit easier. You have toddlers, I live on the floor, exploring life from their lens. And throwing water around and playing with buckets and things like that. So when you have children, it's a little bit easier because you just do whatever they want to do. That's a challenge if you're a parent, or even if you're an uncle or an aunt, and you're able to just hang out with the child for a day and see life through their lens. They have very little worries. They have worries, especially as they get into elementary and grade school, but little children know that they're being taken care of. So they let loose and they explore life with sort of this innocent lens. And so I think that's helpful if you can spend the day with a child.
Yeah, children, they're innocent, they're unfiltered, and they will tell you just like it is. My one of my baby nieces, she said, Auntie Jessie, you chew too much gum. I'm like, okay. Anyway, so we're just about at 12 o'clock Central Time, 1 o'clock Eastern Time. And I do want to do a quick recap. And for those who can stay, we'll take a few more questions. If you have to drop off at this point, this is being recorded. There will be an email with a link to the recording, additional resources. And one of those resources is I think it's the American Psychiatric Association. They have a mental health toolkit for employers that I think it would be helpful if you're interested and you need something and to gather some ideas. The link is actually in the chat if you just want to copy and paste that. And we'll also have a survey on this conversation to learn what you'd like to hear about. If you want this conversation to continue, and other resources that you can take advantage of either through St. Cyr Consulting or through Ana Ayobiojo. And we actually we'll be working together so you can get both of us at one location. And if you'd like these types of sessions within your organization, please contact us. We do leadership development, workforce training, diversity, equity, inclusion, and HR work as well. But if I were to just highlight some of the things that we talked about today, I think the first one is prioritize self-care. Show yourself some grace, show yourself some empathy, because we're all going through this together. And some of us manage this better than others. And reach out, speak up if you need help. There are resources out there, and I will share some in the follow-up email. And as you're empathetic and gracious to yourself, you can lead more with empathy and also be inclusive in your practices to understand the needs of your workforce or of your team or of your family. And so that you can support them in the ways that they need. And that also builds a sense of belonging and appreciation. The other tip that we'd share here is communicate, 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 communicate. Where we are, be honest and gracious in your communication. And sweet, thank you, I appreciate that. But be gracious in your communication. Make resources available, give your employees options, give your employees options. They are adults, they want to feel like they have some level of control as well. And they want to see that you understand that not, everyone doesn't fit in a box. There's no one size fits all approach to this. Do check-ins if you're not doing them already, but in your communication plan, make resources available and let folks know what you're doing to keep them safe. And remember, it took some time for us to adjust to where we are, where we were before, to get into it. As we learned about this pandemic, it took some time to adjust during the pandemic, and it takes time to adjust afterwards. So remember that it's going to take time. Anna, any final words on mental health? And I love the starting point that we all have mental health and we all have to take care of ourselves. But any final words before we take one or two other questions?
Yeah, I mean, you said it pretty much all and summed it up so well. But I definitely think is I'm always all about tribe, is having people in your life, in your personal life, that are going to support you, and people in your organization, and having a team of people. I think is so helpful to for yourself in terms of self care, but also to help you navigate life, and your business, and things like that. I think is we were meant to live in community. And I think that this has challenged us in a way that is unexplainable. I think that, for some people, they've noticed that they miss people, but I think for others, it has made them grow doubtful of other people. And there's been a gap that has sort of threatened relationships. And I think we need to get back to that by really creating communities for ourselves and creating communities for other people.
That's powerful. That's so powerful. Thank you for that. And so, any final questions? Kirsten, I don't know if you've gotten any other questions, but again, the resources are going to be in the follow-up email. You should receive that email by tomorrow with a link to a survey. Let us know what you think and what you need, and we'll also provide additional resources and tips in the email. So please take a look at it. Almost everything in there is free, and you can take advantage of it for yourself and for your organization. And just make sure that you check your junk email or your promotions email, and if you have Gmail, just to make sure that you don't miss out on it. It's under St. Cyr Consulting or J. St. Cyr at stcyrconsulting.com, and that's where you'll get it. So any final questions before we close?
Jesse, just want to say hello from your friends in the Massachusetts Treasury out here on the East Coast. It's great seeing you and listening, and thanks for the invitation. I know we had some of our, we have Swee Lin Wong, who's the Assistant Treasurer, Chief of HR in the Massachusetts State Treasurer's Office that's on, as well as some other staff. So just want to say thank you. You look great.
Oh, thank you.
We miss you out here in the Boston area, and I'm sure we'll talk soon. And thanks very much for this informative discussion today. It's something that I think that we all will be struggling with as we slowly return back to work. Be well.
Thank you so much, Jim. And thank you, Jim and Swee and others. I see some folks that I've worked with before, and other leaders from different organizations. Thank you all for entrusting me and Anna with this very important and timely conversation around mental health. When we post about it, please let folks know that you enjoyed this session, if you in fact enjoyed it, and what you got from it, and share some of the tips with your network as well, because we're all in this together, and we have to start understanding that we can't do this without each other. So thank you again for your time. Anna, thank you so much for this important conversation. It is so timely, and I really appreciate working with you and partnering with you on this conversation. If you want to take advantage of other leadership development trainings, Leadership at Work is a 10-part series or individual sessions that you can take advantage of for your organization. And if you'd like to contact us, again, we'll have a follow-up email with additional information. Thank you, Danielle. We'll have additional information. And if you could go just to the next slide, Kirsten, it's the last one, I'm sorry. You can contact us, J. St. Cyr or info@stcyrconsulting.com, Anna's information, my information, our businesses, all of that is going to be in the email. So please, please, please pay attention to that and feel free to forward it because it's really helpful information that any employer, any leader, any person can take advantage of. So until next time, thank you again for your time. It is an honor and privilege to be able to put these types of sessions together for all of you. And have a great one. Be well and take care of yourself. Bye.